All right, so here we have Mongo running, and it's connected to a Mongo database that is running on this tab over here. And we are working with a database for this class. We're working with this database, whiteboard cs5610 sp20. And in here we have a couple of collections. Right? We have collections that represents all the quizzes. So we can say db.quizzes.find, and we have these 5 quizzes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quizzes, right? Quiz 1, 2, all the way through 6. We see also that each quiz has references to several questions. Let's do it pretty so we can see it better. We see that quiz 2 here has 2 questions, and quiz 4 has 1 question, right? And so these are referencing records that are stored in a different collection, which are in the, let's see, what collections do we have? We have, the quizzes. The quizzes, and we have the questions. So let's look at the questions. And we can say fine and pretty. And there we are. So we have these 3 questions. Certainly, you are encouraged to insert many more questions from the array that we provided in the assignment, to copy them and insert them. If you want to explore the import function that Mongo has, you can use that as well. So once we have that data, the next thing that we'd like to be able to do is see if we could capture somebody submitting an assignment, right? And what we're thinking of doing is capturing a reference to the original quiz, right? So these are the quizzes. So we'd like to have a reference to the quiz and say, hey, these answers are for that particular quiz. But we also want to be able to receive what were the answers that you gave for the questions for that quiz, right? And we'd like to be able to copy them into the database so that we have an audit, or we have a history of the things that you answered for that particular quiz, right? So the proposed schema that I'm suggesting is this one, right, where we're going to store, right, an attempt. Somebody submits a quiz, and it's stored in the database in a collection. That collection, we might call it quiz attempts, and it's going to keep track of a reference to the original quiz, which we can always dereference, right, and retrieve the entire, the name, the title of the quiz, and all that. We can always retrieve that. We can also are going to copy in an array of the answers array. We're actually going to copy an array of the original questions. Notice that we're not storing references here. See that? We're not storing references. Right here in quiz, we are storing references, just the ID. But here, we're not storing the reference. Instead, we are storing this entire file, right? The declaration of these questions, this whole thing is going to be stored, right? Including the original title of the question, the original question string, the correct answer, right? The answer plus this is going to have your brand new answer. Now this information is going to be coming from the client. The client, remember, we have sent these questions over to the client, which the client is using to render the question. All these questions. Well, it's going to send us back that same object that we sent it, but the object that is going to be sending us is going to also include the answer that was selected by the student, right? So in that entire object, we're going to store it, right, as an array of all those questions inside of the answers. And one might say, well, why don't you instead have an array of references, and you could reference the ID of the original question, right? And if you want, you can always populate, to generate to get a hold of the question. Now the problem with that option is that this would make my answers forever tied to that question. And what I mean by that is that as a faculty, it happens quite a bit that I need to go and edit a question, right? Because it was misspelled or it was wrong or whatever, and so if I change it, right? Well, what happens to everybody who answered that question in the past, right? It would look funny if the question has a completely different question string, right? And in the past you had answered a completely different question with different choices, with different whatever. So instead, what we're going to do is that we're going to grab the copy of what you actually answered to the actual question, so that we can always re-render the original quiz, the original questions and answers, irrespective of whether the original question changed later on. So this will allow us to keep track of that history, right? It's like an audit, right? That makes sense? Notice that this is not going to be redundant, right? Because right, if a DBA or a system architect or a modeling guru would come here and might say, well, but you're now introducing redundancy, because you not only do you have the question stored in that other collection, but you also have a copy here, right? That would be true if the expected behavior would be that logically those two would always need to be the same, right? And then inadvertent modifications of one or the other might cause inconsistency in the data. But notice that we're not going to run into that problem, because the expectation is that these are not necessarily need to be the same, right? I just would need to have a log or an audit of what the question was at some point. So we're good, right? We're not really introducing any redundancy here. All right, so we're going to use this as the schema for the attempts, right? So I'm just gonna copy this over. I'm gonna grab that, and I'm gonna create. Actually, no. Let me first create a brand new directory where we can create these attempts. Right. So let's head over to the to our IDE, and let's create a brand new directory where we can model the attempts. Right. So in here, we'll create a new file called quiz attempt schema, and we'll create it right here, new JavaScript, sorry. All right, so in here we'll copy this content, copy, and then paste it. All right. Okay, so notice that our attempt is loading the definition of the question schema. See that? It is loading it. It's going up and then down to the question and fetching the schema right here, right? Because we are using it as an array of the structure, right, for our answers, right, which is going to include the answers. Which let me check to see if we actually edit that in the schema. Do we have answers here? Okay, we don't have answers, right? So let's add that. So answer as a string. So this is going to allow. So the intent of this answer here is not that we're going to store the answer in the original definition of the question, right? Because notice this answer is not representing the correct answer, right? The correct answer is being represented by this field. Instead, this answer is again not because we want to store the answer in the record of the definition of the question. Instead, we want to be able to keep track of the answer. We're going to send these objects, question objects, to the client. The client is going to respond to us when the question is submitted with a copy of what we sent it, right, from the server, but it's going to have an additional field. It's going to have the answer field, and so when it comes in from the client, we're going to use that object that has this structure, right? We're going to use it to store it as an array into another collection called the quiz attempts collection. Okay. All right, any questions on what the strategy is?